Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 1, about theories of government. It is Lesson 2, about government power. In this lesson, you'll learn about how government differs from other entities who may try to control us. And you'll learn about the methods that government uses to exert that control. We concluded the previous lesson by learning that a basic feature of government is that it tries to control the community over which it presides. But government is not the only institution in our lives that may try to exercise control over us. What are other entities, besides government, that may try to tell us what to do? One such entity is a business. Businesses can try to control us in multiple ways. One is through trying to persuade us to purchase their products. But there's even a more direct way, if we are their employees. It may simply order us to speak a certain way, dress a certain way, to give up certain habits and adopt others, etc. And there are real consequences if we don't obey these directives. We can have our hours cut, be demoted, or even fired. Another institution in our lives that may try to control us is our religion. Religions are full of things to do and not do. Be charitable, don't lie, keep the Sabbath day holy, thou shalt not kill, etc. And there are consequences for disobeying these commandments too. You can be shunned by your fellow worshipers, excommunicated from your congregation, or even thrust down to hell for your sins. Of course, government tries to control us too. It passes laws about everything from what food we can eat to where we may travel. And there are consequences, such as being arrested and going to jail. So what makes government different from the other institution in our lives that may be trying to control us? We can understand the answer to this question by comparing how two of those entities go about getting money from us. Churches ask for money from their members, and we call that tithing. Now, let's imagine what could happen if a member refuses to pay his tithes. Could the minister of that church come down from his pulpit, place a gun to the worshiper's head, and force him to pay? If the minister behaved in such a manner, what would happen? Would we think the minister behaved appropriately or inappropriately? Is it okay for him to use force to take someone else's money? Of course not. The minister would be viewed as a criminal. The government also asks for money. We call that taxes. What happens if we refuse to pay? Can the government then place a gun to our heads and force us to do so? Yes, they can. I don't mean that figuratively, but literally. If you refuse to pay taxes, you will eventually be arrested and imprisoned. If you refuse to go quietly, the police will aim their weapons at you and force you to comply. And when the government points its guns at you, it is you who is considered the criminal, not the government. This comparison shows us the important difference between government and other institutions that might try to control us. That difference can be seen in this quote from the German sociologist Max Weber. He begins by referring to a state, which we learned in the previous lesson is a political community with a common authority over it. It is a place with a government. What makes it what it is? He says that it is the fact that it, and it alone, can legitimately use physical force within its boundaries. This is what makes a government different from other institutions. They cannot use harm to your person as a way to gain your obedience, but government can. Government can force you to obey them. And when they do, we shrug our shoulders and say, of course, that's what they do. Now that you understand how government is different, knowing what it can legitimately do that other institutions cannot do, let's examine what methods it might use to force us to obey. The government may legitimately deprive us of our property, which includes our money. They do this through such things as fines imposed or property confiscated as punishment for committing a crime. A police officer issuing a speeding ticket, as seen in the background photo of this slide, is an example of this. If anyone else did these same things to us, we would call it theft. But it is okay for the government to take our stuff. The government may legitimately take away our liberty too. In other words, take away our freedom to move about and do what we please, such as by placing us in prison. If anyone else restrained us in the same way, that person would be committing crimes such as kidnapping and false imprisonment. But the government can lock us away, and it is okay. The government may even go so far as to take our lives, if we don't follow their rules, such as by committing murder or treason against our country. If we were to do the same thing to someone else, even if they deserve it, we would be committing murder against them. But when the government kills someone, it is called execution, not murder, and it is considered legitimate. Think about all this for a moment and let it sink in. It isn't something we usually think about. The government can steal from you. The government can enslave you. The government can murder you. And it's all okay. Is that frightening to you? It should be. Having anything in our lives that can do those things to us, when it chooses, should scare us. So why do we tolerate it? Why are we okay with government? We will answer that question in the next lesson. That completes this lesson. Now let's review what we have learned. How is government different from other institutions that might try to control us? Is it that it can legitimately use force against us? Is it that it gives us rules for our lives? Is it that it demands our obedience? Is it that it provides benefits for all of us? Government is different because it can legitimately use force against us, to force us to obey. Other institutions also give us rules, demand we obey them, and try to do good for us. But only government can physically threaten us to force us to do what it wants. What types of force may the government use against us? We discussed 3 methods that government can legitimately use that others cannot. What are they? One is that government may take our property. Another way is that government may take away our liberty. In other words, the government can throw us in prison. And the most extreme way is that the government may take away our lives. They can kill us for disobeying their rules. That completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 1. It'll be Lesson 3 about why we have government.